again. I grew up in a house that sat on the edge of my grandfather's old farm in between my Uncle Tom. He was a quiet and a gentle man, and my Aunt Shelley, who was very much the opposite. She was wiry and unstable. She was always drunk, and she hated me. She had a son about 4 years older than me, little John. He died when I was 5. This exact story always seemed to shift, but I was told he was teasing the waves at the beach and got pulled into the ocean, and they never did recover his body. I guess Aunt Shelley resented the fact that she had to watch me grow up after little John had been taken from her. She'd make snarky comments to my Nan about me being the favorite grandson, or the lucky one, she'd call me. Nan or Uncle Tom would give me a hug and tell me not to listen to her, and Aunt Shelley that she'd been through a lot, and she wasn't quite right. There was a small back path that connected our house to Nan and Pop's place on the other side of the land. It was a little shortcut down the hill, past the old barn and the root cellar, and every evening I'd stroll down that path to sit with Nan and drink milky tea while she watched the news. And when it was time to go, she'd hand me a little treat. For the fairies, she'd say with a little wink, and Nan would walk me back along the path toward my house, and we'd laugh and skip and eat our fairy treats. We'd always slow as we passed this little grove of alders just off to the side of the path, and Nan would always say, "That's where the fairies gathered." She'd take a little candy or a few crumbs and toss it in the trees, and sometimes she'd take something else to throw. She always said the fairies loved special gifts, and that would keep us safe. Usually it was some sort of small toy or trinket that she'd toss, and we'd walk on. As I got older, she'd let me walk home alone, but always with a treat for the fairies in my pocket, and every now and then one of those special fairy gifts to throw in the woods. One time it was a hair clip, another time it was a small Boy Scout badge, once a little green plastic soldier. But whatever it was, I'd toss it in the alders when I walked past, and it was just our little tradition. It was just a silly little ritual that we kept up over the years. Until the year I was in grade 5. That was the year that my best friend, Kenny White, disappeared. Kenny was a funny kid. He was quiet, but he was smart. We'd tease each other over hockey teams. I was a big Leafs fan, and he was die-hard Penguins fan. And we'd argue Wendell Clark against Mario Lemieux. Kenny's parents were going through a nasty divorce at the time, and one day when his dad went to pick him up from his mom's house, they were gone. Not a bag packed, not a note. They just vanished. Some said his mom had dyed Kenny's hair and left the country with him. Others said that she was suicidal and had probably dragged Kenny off a cliff with her. Nobody knows, but there was never a sign of either of them ever again. To this day, Kenny's dad still clings to the hope that he's alive out there somewhere, but even back in grade 5, I knew that probably wasn't the case. Not long after Kenny disappeared, I went down to Nan's house one evening, and I knew from the moment I walked in that something was wrong. Pop was off in the root cellar doing something or other, and Nan was at the stove making a pot of soup. But in the dining room, my dad and Uncle Tom and Aunt Shelley were sitting around the table. They'd obviously been drinking and arguing with each other. Nan put her hands on my shoulders and turned me back towards the door, told me I should go home. She pushed me out of the room and reached into her apron and slipped me a little packet for the fairies, like she had always done, as she was pushing me out the door. Then there came a howl from the room. Aunt Shelley jumped to her feet and screamed, "Yes, give him something. Have you paid your fucking debt yet, Mother? Is it finally enough?" My father lunged at Aunt Shelley and started to scream. Uncle Tom tried to stop him. He was yelling too. I heard a bottle shatter and a chair hit the wall, and the last thing I heard as the door slammed shut was Aunt Shelley screaming about her beloved little John. I headed home along the path, but as I got closer to the alders, something happened. Everything went absolutely silent, like the whole world was on mute. I could see light coming from around the cellar door, and I ran towards it to get Pop, but the more I ran, the further away it seemed to get. I tried to scream, but the sound was just swallowed by this fog of silence. I turned around. I was panicking. My hands were shaking. I reached into my pocket and fumbled with the little packet that Nan had given me, and out fell a small pin with the logo of the Pittsburgh Penguins, just like Kenny used to wear. Everything went black. I woke up, I was in my own bed, with Mom telling me I was safe and it was just a dream, but Mom's always been a terrible liar. Everything changed shortly after that. I stopped taking the path to Nan's house and she stopped talking about the fairies. A short while later, to everyone's shock, Pop took the bucket of his tractor and collapsed the root cellar in on itself, brought in a few loads of fill and leveled the whole area, the path, the alders, the marsh. And by next spring, it had been sold to a developer who turned it into 1-acre lots for townies. That winter, my father ran off with some missus in Alberta. Not long after, Aunt Shelley finally succeeded in drinking herself to death. But Uncle Tom, he stepped up. He made sure that Nan and Pop were looked after. And after Pop died, he moved in with Nan and cared for her, even as the Alzheimer's set in. He was always adamant that she should live out her final days in her own home and never be put in some nursing home. But when lung cancer took Uncle Tom, we had no choice. Nan's in her 90s now, late-stage dementia, and this is shameful for a grandson to say, but I hate visiting her. She rambles with the same stories. For the first time in 30 years, she's back to talking about the fairies, and the alders, and the old root cellar, and Little John, and Kenny White, and a bunch of other names I don't even recognize. But I'm guessing you know who they are, right, officer?